Okay.
Kind of related to this, I wanted to talk about this just briefly because I think it's an example of the hypocrisy that's out there in terms of cancel culture, and this is something that Jeff Zucker really pushed hard on CNN was cancel culture. And this is the whole thing with Whoopi Goldberg and The View, where Whoopi, for those of you out there who don't know, she came out and she basically didn't recognize Jewish people as a race. She said the Holocaust was white people on white people violence, and that it was about man's inhumanity to man. And it basically negated like all the atrocities that were said against the Jewish people by the Nazis. And Whoopi got a slap on the wrist and a 2-week suspension from The View for basically saying that the Holocaust was just white people on white people violence. And this brought up a lot of kind of calls on Gina Carano, who got basically fired from Disney for sending out a tweet that didn't even go that far. It was basically like a picture, and she just said like, "Be nice to your neighbors," essentially. And the contrast and the hypocrisy here between Gina Carano's cancellation and Whoopi Goldberg's slap on the wrist is like night and day. And it really is something to think about in terms of like, how this all plays out, and the inconsistency. Like either everyone gets canceled or no one gets canceled. Like this is an 0 and 1 kind of like dichotomy here. So like there are uneven standards being applied based off of people's political views, and that's basically what it comes down to. And Gina Carano, in the wake of this, has called for a conversation over cancellation and what people should be doing. And this is a really good article on Bounding into Comics based on this. And we also have this article here where it's the same company, right? Disney owns ABC, which does The View. She got a slap on the wrist. Disney owns Lucasfilm, which Gina Carano was employed under, and she got fired. And I think the stuff that Whoopi said was way worse than anything that you could possibly pull out of what Gina Carano basically communicated in that one tweet. So what do you guys think about this type of like raging hypocrisy here in terms of like, there's no kind of even justice under the law. There's no even application of the rules, especially when it comes to Disney, because remember they fired James Gunn for tweets and then they rehired him when people kind of like said like, hey, why are you firing this guy? We like working with him. So why do you think this is? And do you think that Gina Carano has a point here?
Yeah, sure, man. I mean, look, you know why it is.
We all know.
If your political views tilt in one direction, you get more of a pass than another. I hate this stuff. As I said last week, man, radical First Amendment stand. I love the idea of you counter speech you don't like with more speech. Don't try to shout down or deplatform those with whom you disagree. Don't create don't normalize. There's another great buzzword that's gained a lot of purchase recently. Don't normalize a culture where anytime something offends your sensibilities, you try to weaponize whatever political capital you have to make sure that nobody can have access to it. Right? It's just not going to end well. So my 3 points I will make about this are, number one, for me, I think the only way we are going to step back from the precipice we are at culturally is if somebody tries to be the adult in the room and de-escalate, which means when it is happening to someone you don't like or with whom you disagree, you exercise the restraint to not demand the Cersei Lannister walk of shame for that person. Okay? So like, I think it's awesome that Disney rehired James Gunn, because it was stupid for them to have fired him in the first place. I hate that stuff. And I think for the same reason they ought to bring back Gina Carano. And for the same reason, I think that the, frustration reportedly of Whoopi's co-hosts on The View, which I think is kind of a silly show, but whatever. There's lots of channels and lots of media outlets and somebody watches it, so good for them. I think it's justified. So that's my first point. Like, just don't demand a pound of flesh. And, again, along with that, I guess I kind of already said that we have a precedent for granting someone a reprieve in Gunn, who honestly, if I'm putting all of them on a spectrum, he to me is the worst. I get he was joking about it, but like, for Christ's sake, man, could you not use like sexual abuse of kids as the subject for your humor? That by far was the most screwed up transgression in my mind. And I'm still saying give the guy his job back. And I'm glad they did. And so I guess kind of the third and final point I'll make, going back to counter speech with more speech, is guess what, kids? Like, topics around race are incredibly messy. And I think it would be far more illuminating to allow Whoopi to explain and have a dialogue about why she thinks what she thinks, because she clearly still thinks that way. If you go back and you look at all of her comments since the initial airing, the only time she has walked back the substance of her argument at any point was when it was clear she was in total career self-preservation mode, which again is like a crappy thing. It's a crappy trend to promote if we're trying to have useful dialogue, where if somebody thinks something and holds a belief that I guarantee you is consistent with what a lot of other people who don't have a television show think, that they're not allowed to have a constructive dialogue around it. So again, like, I understood the point she was trying to make. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I am curious about how she came to that and where it's coming from. And, you know, if we're really going to be honest about both racial and intellectual diversity, we are just going to have a much higher tolerance level for thoughts that make us uncomfortable.
So, Mr. Reagan, I think my favorite reaction to the Whoopi Goldberg situation, from Twitter at least, is that how can she be against Jews? She's a Jew. Her name's Goldberg.
I'll talk through my cat's distraction here. Yeah, look, the reason that some people like the fact that Whoopi Goldberg is getting temporarily canceled, or they celebrate this kind of thing when it happens to the left, is that we all recognize how stupid it is. Aston, I will murder you. We all recognize how stupid it is, you know, and they're using it as a weapon against the right, obviously. And then when it happens to them, they have to go, I guess we have to be morally consistent. Okay, Whoopi, you're going to have to be punished too for 2 weeks, right? I mean, it's, you know, they'll give you a slap on the wrist just to say, look, we're morally consistent. But I think on the right, we do need to be morally consistent. And yeah, we celebrate the fact that, okay, you guys messed up too, or messed up too. I honestly, like, Gina Carano didn't even mess up, all right? It was a fake scandal. It was a fake scandal. The James Gunn thing is kind of a fake scandal also, I think, because the left has this bizarre idea that if you say something or you do something that they interpret as racist, or they interpret as homophobic or something like that, you're a homophobe, you're a racist. On the right, I'll represent the right. We say, no, what's in your heart makes you a racist, or what's in your heart makes you a homophobe, or not. And your actions and your words come from that, right? So if you say something that somebody perceives as, you know, some kind of phobic, or some kind of like, you know, some kind of like bigotry, you cannot automatically label somebody that, right? It has to be something that you believe. It has to be something that comes from your heart. I don't think James Gunn is a pedophile. I don't think, well, maybe, but I have no evidence to support that.
He just has a really weird sense of humor.
Yeah, he's just
inappropriate.
Look, comedy to me is kind of sacred. Like, I hold comedy up very high in terms of like free speech, almost at the same level as political discourse. Like, you should not be able to censor comedy. You should not be able to censor political discourse, because these are ways, like, comedy is supposed to make people happy. Right? And when you start canceling that, it's like, no, you have to be miserable. And, you know, political discourse is a little bit more important, because, you know, that's how we figure out how to fix this messed up world that we live in, you know? And if you start canceling that, you start, you know, stifling the process by which we learn to make the world a better place. With Whoopi Goldberg, I mean, this is a stupid scandal as well, because I think that I don't even really know why she said that, because even if we say, okay, technically maybe Jews aren't a different race because if you look at their DNA, they're primarily German. And that's true. You can look that up. I mean, most Ashkenazi Jews are actually German. I'm German, right? So they're like my cousins, I guess. For the most part, they don't really have Israeli DNA, most Ashkenazi Jews. Okay, so maybe it isn't technically another race. But the Germans believed it was another race, right? They believed that they were exterminating another race. So it was a racial situation, whether or not you can, I don't know what she was thinking in saying that. That's a bizarre statement to make. But of course she's going to get in trouble. Of course she's going to upset people. Of course there's going to be some kind of small controversy. But to say, oh, you're not allowed to be on TV because you made a mistake. Look, if the women of The View had to take 2 weeks leave after everything they said that was like a mistake or wrong, they would never be on this freaking show. Yeah. It would be 2 weeks, they get one episode, 2 weeks, they get one episode. Because they say something wrong every single day on that show. All of them. Anyway, that's my throwing that out there.
All right.
Boom.
So